Battlestar Galactica Season 3, Episode 16, Dirty Hands is over, but we have to go fracking down the hatch here on RHAP. We know scripted TV. We know Battlestar Galactica's 16th episode of its 13th season, its 13th tribe, third season, Dirty Hands, which I'm Josh Wigler. I watch all the time. Mike Bloom. We better not be talking about Dirty Hands anymore. I'm done talking about Dirty Hands.
Did y'all say dirty hands?
Dirty Hands? No, in the dirty hands of the dirty fans.
I don't even like that little BSG hat.
BSG here. Battlestar on strike.
Welcome back. Finally, BSG, listen, you had to go through a little bit of stuff. You had to work some stuff out in the middle of the season. But here we are in an episode that, I don't know, it's tough to say this is like true blue BSG because, again, I think it was missing. Well, exactly. I think it was missing a lot of those mystery box elements that we are accustomed to seeing in this show. Still, the Cylons are just like gonzo at this point. We have not seen hair nor hide of them since that epic two-parter when Caprica 6 and Athena got Hera back. But it does sort of a secondary thing that I love about the show, which is getting to kind of like distill societal themes through this post-apocalyptic or like in the midst of an apocalyptic.
Sure.
I don't know. Do you know if you're in an apocalypse, if you're in the middle of it? Like the Eye of a Hurricane type of story. And here, Josh, we're talking class warfare in BSG. And listen, these shows meet you where you are, as you like to say. And I think this was not only just a really high quality episode, I think especially in comparison, honestly, to some of the stuff we had watched recently, but also incredibly salient topics about feeling that there is an increasingly widening gulf between, the rich quite literally getting richer and what are the proper ways to get the people in power to listen.
Yes. So we explore that in great detail in this episode as Chief is once again sort of returned to his position as union leader. And now it's President Roslin who is union buster.
Though she ends up kind of striking up.
By the end, she's good.
I think Adama is more so like, if we're talking bad cop, slightly less bad cop, that's what Roslin and Adama are opting here. Honestly, Josh, this reminds me a lot of like a season 1 episode. I mean, quite literally with Bastille Day, but I feel like the way in particular, my biggest sticking point is probably the way that Adama and Roslin are characterized. I would not go so far as to say it's completely out of character for them, but it does remind me of like the season 1 versions of these people. And I actually feel like in Bastille Day, someone like Adama especially really did take a very hardline stance against the Zarek of it all, much like in this episode. And much like in that episode, Roslin was like as hardlined as Adama was, and at the end was like, okay, let's do a little bit of compromise, much like she does in this episode as well.
Okay, we're going to talk about all of it here today. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, Down the Hatch, RHAP, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also send in feedback, down the hatch, RHAP@gmail.com. You can rate every single episode on a scale from 0 to 4.2. That's also where you can send your angry letters when you realize that Down the Hatch is also going on strike. We're not actually going on strike. We're going on an announced hiatus. So before you pick up your rocks and your tomatoes and snowballs at my window, before you throw all that stuff.
I was going to say, I don't know if people were keeping those in the freezer waiting for a time where they were upset with you, Josh, because I don't know. It's a nice spring sun outside at the time we're talking right now.
Don't throw those things my way. We are on an announced...
Because you won't be here.
An announced hiatus. I won't be here to receive those things. We will be back in a few weeks talking about the final 4 episodes of Season 3, which for your planning purposes, we're going to talk about episode 17 as a podcast, episode 18 as a podcast, and breaking from tradition, even in 2-part finales, we've usually taken them piece by piece. I think that the finale plays better if we talk about it in a single shot, so we will do 19 and 20 as a single podcast.
Whoa, the finale is a single shot. Wow, that's very audacious. They bring in like Cary Fukunaga to just do the whole 2-hour thing.
They do a really impressive oneer in the BSG Season 3 finale. So
it's just one long circuitous hallway.
That's right. So 3 pods on the other side of our break. This will be the last podcast on Down the Hatch for the month of March. So, Mike, as we mentioned, this is an episode in which Chief Tyrrell and a bunch of other folks realize, you know what? We're only a pawn in their game, man. We aren't. We're not going to play their game anymore. We're gonna flip the board. We're gonna stop production. We're gonna make them finally answer to us. The final straw was this poor Danny Noon losing a hand, and if not for Danny Noon losing a dirty hand, I don't know where this episode goes, but we'll have to get into it and begin right where it begins, Mike, at the flight deck, where it turns out we've got a new person getting a job, or at least wanting to get a new job.
Yeah, so Celix wants to be a pilot. I was also very surprised, Josh. I feel like it's very rare that we get, and I wouldn't say that Tyrrell was like the center of last episode, but certainly played a significant part, more significant than he had the few episodes prior. Very interesting to have that really segue into him taking the main role in the next episode.
Yes.
But I'm not completely mad at it. I feel like he's a character that we very much missed since the days of New Caprica. Even with the stuff going on with the Eye of Jupiter, it felt like he kind of had a role, but not necessarily. He was just kind of lingering there. What's also incredibly interesting is that I am still holding on to, I wouldn't necessarily say hope, but the supposition that Chief Tyrrell is a Cylon.
This has been one of your longest running Cylon predictions, is you think Chief is a Cylon. Do you remember who you picked for the other spots?
No, absolutely not. I'm going to leave that up to
let's adjust it right now. Why don't you give me, who do you think? There's 5 remaining Cylons according to the Cylons themselves. Who are they? You're saying Chief is one of them.
I know Chief is one of them. I believe I debunked Starbuck as being one of them, even though maybe we'll talk about what's going on next time. We still haven't addressed the whole Starbuck is the chosen one storyline that came up a few episodes ago. Let's see. I am going to say that I'm going to say at least one is a character we have not met yet. I do not think the final 5 are all familiar faces.
Okay, so Chief is your first prediction. Someone we have not met yet is your second prediction.
Yes, exactly. I'm going with a wild card here.
Okay.
I'll throw out some other names here. Let's put Felix Gaeta in there. Go back to that old chestnut standard.
Okay. Is not Starbuck an official pick?
No, it just means who I'm discounting at the moment.
Got
so
it.
No Starbuck, no Lee, no last one, no one with the last name Adama, no Roslin, no Baltar.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of like who else can I put in there? D would be very fun to slot in there.
Okay.
What about, now I'm just gonna start throwing shit at the wall.
Well, you got one more. Throw one more.
Only one more. Okay, one more. Then I actually will give this one thought. Let us say, I will go with maybe not Roslin, but Tori. Let's say Tori.
Okay.
I'm led to believe that Tori, and unfortunately poor Tori, had, much like I've experienced recently, Josh, and reported on, an off-screen shoulder dislocation.
Yeah, that's right. We get an off-screen shoulder injury for Tori here. Okay.
So Tori will be voted out in the next episode.
All right, you're locking in your picks. You've got Chief, Felix Gaeta, Duala, Tori, and someone we don't know yet.
Yeah, and
I'm putting this in our doc so we remember this. You already did this once. This is the updated version. We'll lock this in for now.
Though I would like to see what the previous version is so I could make updates based on that. So we'll say this is like the proto version. When we come back after the break, I will say, all right, this is my quote-unquote final 5 for the final 4.
But for a very long time, you have been supposing that Chief might be a Cylon. So how does this episode read if that's the case for you?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I would say that the Cylon attitude has certainly felt, right? Like as Guys Baltar would say, a bifurcated society, that there are these masters and the slaves, in a manner of speaking, that the Cylons were created by man to essentially become their kind of worker bees, and workers of the world unite. The Cylons were able to rise up, overthrow the bourgeoisie, and hopefully the proletariat shall then inherit. So I think while it's in line with the Cylon mentality, is that not just the mentality of like everyone who feels like they're the underdog? You know, everyone who feels like the little guy. Hell, I would imagine that even humanity on New Caprica felt like, the Cylons are the ones in their ivory towers. We're the rank and file beneath. So while I would say that out of one side of my mouth, at the other side, I'm just saying, yeah, this is what anyone tells themselves to like
Sure.
give themselves the initiative to be able to rise up and fix their lot in life.
All right, so let's talk it through. It's a lot about Chief and his crew, and it begins. Everyone's kind of complaining about the long hours, and we're just like working, 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 working. Celix, the cat, shows up. She's on laundry patrol, and Figursky is being a little bit of a sexist pig. Figursky, who knew, had this in him, as he's like, "I hope you folded my underwear the way I like it."
Yeah, honestly,
And
the more I find out about Anthony Figursky, the less I want to know him. Like, he was
yeah,
very fun as this enigma with this fantastic name when he was introduced in season 2. Now he's made 3 appearances in season 3, and I feel like they're continually getting worse in terms of
yeah.
the depictions of this man.
Yes. So he's telling Celix, like, "Oh, you're gonna have to really do a better job on my laundry, especially because you're not gonna do it for much longer." She's like, "No, I think I'm gonna be doing your laundry forever." She apparently has applied for flight training to become a pilot, but she's been denied. She's too essential here, Mike. Her very important laundry services cannot be lost, according to the powers that be.
Now, is it for the powers that be? Because we'll see her get that, flight position reinstated towards the end. And Chief Tyrrell does admit at one point, like, okay, I did think you were too essential. Is this a retread of what he was talking about with Callie last episode of like, I thought you were too important down here, so I put the kibosh on it? Or does it seem like it truly is coming down from above?
Hard to say. I mean, I think like Chief through the rest of this episode is going to feel some kind of guilt about like the way that he's been carrying himself in the face of all of this hard conditions, all these hard conditions facing the worker. Is he feeling like a hypocrite? Is he responsible for Celix?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's not really verbalized, but he finds himself in a position where, like, while he is a leader, he's feeling kind of out of control with
Yeah.
this particular situation, right? That, like, he is meant to be looked at as a representative of these people, but at least for the first half of this episode, he's like, I'm just a cog in the machine, quite literally, like the machine
I'm
that needs
just
to
a
be fixed.
cog. Yeah, I'm only a
Exactly.
cog.
I'm going to teach you how this gear shift works, young
Yeah.
Miles, or
Yeah.
whatever his name was. 12-year-old boy could really fit into a Schoolhouse Rock
Danny
cartoon.
Noon.
Danny Noon, exactly. But I do think that, and I would say Danny Noon does not have 2 hands to tell what the time on the clock
No,
is. But
unfortunately not.
I think that Tyrrell at this point just feels like, yeah, what can you do? My hands are tied, in a manner of speaking. And it's interesting to look into the psychology of this character who, on the one hand, you could figure will get increasingly frustrated at the idea that the people in power are not listening to him. On the other hand, and we talked about this last time, seemed totally fine with like honestly resetting back to the status quo. And this was somebody who we talked a little bit about at the beginning of the series, kind of had a Miles O'Brien quality to him, where like in the miniseries, right? They're like trying to talk about like, oh, we wanted to promote you, give you a title. And he's like, no, my place is down here. Like he never has been somebody to jockey for a position, which I don't know if it lies in contrast with the ethos of this episode, which is like he can't get that position because of where he came from, or if it's more so supporting that idea.
Yeah. Okay, we have a big issue where Racetrack and Skulls, not Bulk and Skulls.
I was about to sing the music,
Josh. All right, so Racetrack and Skulls, their Raptor is out of control. They have to eject. The Raptor like is hurtling towards Roslin and Tori on Colonial 1.
The image of them in space, and it just pans over to the two of them gawking out the window.
And they gawk out the window as this thing is hurtling towards them, and then we cut to the title, like the title sequence. And what a cut, because it's like, okay, that's like very close to them. How on earth are they not going to just get killed? And apparently we don't see it, but there was a collision. Roslin and Tori were there. There were a dozen injuries, no deaths, I think, Tori dislocated his shoulder, and Roslin's big inconvenience is, man, now I got to move down to the butt end of Colonial One. I don't like it down here in the butt.
This thing, like, must be made out of the stuff the black box of the plane is made out of. They finally took that comedian's joke and ran with it because, like, it's safe to be hurtling at the ship at a pretty precipitous speed.
Yeah.
And the only thing that happens is mere structural damage that, like, displaces them to the other end of the ship for a brief portion of time. Wow. Yeah. Either that is incredibly sturdy or these Raptors are flimsier than we might have thought. Like, are they made out of cardboard?
I don't know. It kind of feels like it was like a really well deployed case of plot armor that kept Colonial One intact. But we're gonna see Adama paying a visit. She's like, I hate it here. And he's like, well, you're always welcome to one of my beds. And she looks at him like, and he's like,
Oh, yeah, that last episode. Let's continue with the other line. Chief, what's going on with you?
Yeah, Mike Bloom's waiting until we frack, so let's just get it over with, I think is maybe what he's thinking.
I'm just imagining when he says you could sleep in one of my beds that he has done that thing that you sometimes do in college where you have, like, the two twin beds, and if your roommate's gone, you push them together. Did Adama just push together a bunch of beds? And he
is that
just,
a thing you did?
Yeah, so I mean, when I would stay there over the summer, you would have roommates, and then sometimes when the roommate would move out, you'd push the beds together, especially if you were having, a certain someone over for the night, makes it a lot more accommodating.
Wow.
So I'm just imagining that Adama did that with a bunch of beds from probably a bunch of people that died.
Did your roommate ever find out what you were doing to his bed?
I mean, they were gone. They didn't care. It was a property of the school, not their property.
But they came back?
No, after they left.
Oh, okay. And then would you have a new roommate come in and claim the bed?
No.
Okay, so this only happened one time.
Yeah, this is not like a hostile situation. This is like, I was rooming with this person for the summer. They finished their sort of like residency, their tenure. They left, and I was staying there for an extra 4 weeks. It's like, I'll push the beds together. Make a double bed.
I never did that. I never knew.
Oh, well, Josh, you haven't
missed out
until you tried it. Next time your wife push both of your twin beds, because I know you sleep Lucy and Ricky Ricardo style. Push them together.
We do. It's straight out of the 60s for us. Okay, so apparently there are Tillium impurities. The Tillium refining is unreliable right now, and so we need to talk to the head of the Tillium factory here, Mike. Mr. Zeno Fenner. That's Zeno Fenner.
This has to be the most Star Warsy name in BSG history, right?
Zeno Fenner. That's XENOFENNER. Zeno Fenner, or as he's known by his call sign, Rickety Cricket. That's Rickety Cricket, David Patrick Green of Always Sunny fame. Yes.
Wait, no. David Hornsby is the name of Rickety Cricket.
Well, why is this guy's name David Patrick Green, but he's clearly Rickety Cricket?
Oh, well, that's true. I guess, and, we were actually on the way. If he had been staying in that brig for the entirety, he could have turned into, like, a derelict, unhoused man, just searching for crack endlessly.
It looks exactly like Rickety Cricket, to the point that I didn't even bother looking it up. But no, it's not Rickety Cricket, but it's Rickety Cricket. That's Rickety Cricket.
Yeah. It looks
that is Rickety Cricket's doppelganger.
It looks like if David Hornsby and like Bill Burr had a child together, because he's also got that redhead look to him.
I watched the full episode being like, I can't believe Rickety Cricket was on Battlestar Galactica, and I didn't remember. It's not Rickety Cricket, and I've never been more disappointed.
It's that Joe Schmo show bump.
Never been more disappointed. I was going to give him an MVP point, but now I don't want to remember Zeno Fenner. I don't want him on our list anymore. Once he was proven to not be Rickety Cricket, I was no longer interested. Actually, really the thing that I didn't like about Zeno Fenner the most is that he's a big fan of Mein Kampf.
Yeah. Listen, you can't spell xenophobia without XENO.
It's so Zeno is telling Adama and Roslin, like, we've been working too much. We can't keep it up. It's after these glitches we get FaceTime with you, not when like we need. It's like the book says. And the book, when he mentions the book, that's enough for Roslin to have him arrested.
Yeah.
And it's because he's quoting from a book that Gaius Baltar is writing called My Triumphs, My Mistakes. Gaius Baltar is writing the BSG universe's Mein Kampf, and I'm not feeling great about it.
I don't know. Like, this is the most Gaius Baltar thing ever, right? Of like, I'm in prison, possibly subjected to trial after betraying the human race. I need to pen my manifesto and pass it on. The masses must know about the word of Gaius Baltar. It is so incredibly in character, and I love this. You know, we talked about how like okay, when
Roslin
Zarek
wants to burn the book. She wants to throw a book burning party. She hates this. Like, but you know, once you're given a book, it's yours to do what you want with. You own it.
exactly
You don't,
can't lend it as Adama infamously said. But I just think it's such an interesting idea that Baltar is like using this time to impart his wisdom onto the others. And for what it's worth, Zarek did say a few episodes ago, right? Like, don't go forward with this trial because it will cause civil unrest. And I'm sort of like, wasn't the approval rating of Baltar pretty damn low after the whole new Caprica thing? But it goes to show that like he had the ear of the people and got elected for a reason. You know, he was able to, I think, and again, this is capturing some incredibly salient themes. This idea of speaking to people who feel disenfranchised and that those that are making the decisions do not represent them. To have someone come through and say, you know, I was born on a dairy farm. I know what you people are thinking more so than the hoity-toity upper class. They are much more likely to glom onto it, especially if they feel particularly dissatisfied with their situation.
Yeah. That being said, there is going to be a moment in this episode that I think a lot of people would say is one of the greatest Gaius Baltar moments on Battlestar Galactica. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that. I'd forgotten what he had titled his manifesto. It just really struck a nerve today, Mike Bloom.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, it meets you where you are. I'm also intrigued to see, because obviously he had these like handwritten notes. They say his lawyer smuggled it out. We have not met said lawyer, but like, is the lawyer also operating a printing press? Because we see it's like a full booklet. Gaius Baltar's mugshot is on the cover of it. Who's going through with this operation?
Frustratingly, it doesn't seem like the corners have been taken off of the book.
Oh, really? I saw that they were.
Oh, were they?
I thought I saw that they were.
I feel like the corners being taken off of books and pages would really mess with me as somebody who like I'll dog ear my books. I want like I love a well-worn book.
Yes, you have to like fold down the top flap of the page.
I feel like the book is meant to be a physical object that you're supposed to like bend to your will. And I don't know how you would like corner the corners without
maybe that's
corner?
The point. You can't bend this book to your will. And maybe if it does have corners, this particular pamphlet, it's to say, I don't cut corners.
Yes.
These bureaucrats do.
And it's always very dangerous when you get Gaius Baltar in a corner.
Yes. And especially if you find him in a corner as well, because he's probably doing something very unsavory.
Indeed. Okay, let's go to Chief and Callie and Nikki, who all seem to be doing much better than last week. Callie's got the Tiny Tim cane, and that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess you say last week, I guess this clearly shows there was at least some passage of time, considering that she was basically in an iron lung last time that we saw her, and now she's just reduced to a hobble. Hell, she was in the cold open. Like, she's working on the deck again. So maybe she was able to, like, regulate the hours somewhat, but still wants to be at work. But she is drinking the Kool-Aid as well. Basically saying like, well, no wonder Celix got denied because we're not part of the ruling class. Basically, what she is saying is that it's less so about, you know, where you are being predicated on your skill set, or maybe it is because it all boils down to where you came from. Those that were born in the more affluent colonies had the education and the privilege to learn a certain set of skills that might put them in positions like the Secretary of Education turned the president, like the Admiral, like the CAG, etc. And then those that were born in the poorer colonies, you know, your dad was a sheep shearer and you got to be a sheep shearer too, because it is your lot in life. I will say, though, Callie's line of logic really gets undressed here, where Tyrell's like, Duala is from Sagittarian and she's an officer. And Callie's like, yeah, but it's because she married a Capricorn. Duwala was granted a petty officer, but an officer nonetheless for the
She
first
was.
2 seasons prior to marrying Leodama. I feel like that is very much giving her short shrift.
We are just not giving Duwala nearly enough respect. And
now I feel bad that I made her a Cylon.
Yeah, I know. Well, if that's the case, maybe Callie's going to want to watch her back. But yeah, Callie says this classic Callie falling in line with some sort of culty prophetic bullshit. She's loving the Gaius Baltar
Yeah,
book.
I mean, she kind of like Luigi Mangione. I mean, I guess Boomer was the original Luigi Mangione, and she Luigi Mangione, the Luigi Mangione.
I don't think this fully tracks, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Boomer Luigi Mangione Nadama, and
that being said,
Luigi Mangione, the Luigi Mangione.
I feel like Chief Tyrrell in an alternate universe would be great at playing Mario. Anyway, Chief, he's going to get a call from Adama. He says, yeah, Zeno Fenner's been arrested. And she's like, why? He's like, he pissed off the president. And she says, okay, I got to go over to the ship. Why? Well, Zeno Fenner's been arrested. For what? He pissed off the president. Really?
Yeah, you can get arrested for that now?
I'm pretty sure it's a joke, but it turns out like actually that was basically the reason.
Yep.
And Roslin is going to go to Baltar's cell. They rip open his bed. They're searching for pages. They strip search him. Head 6 is like, yeah, enjoy that strip search. Let them take those pages. They could take your pages, but they can't take your ideas.
Your freedom.
Yeah, that's it. So he asks Roslin. He's like very confident and still pretty calm. And he says, maybe you'll write a blurb for the back cover of my book.
And Roslin also, should be noted in this moment, lies that the pages have not gotten out to anybody else. It's only afterwards, when Tyrell goes to visit Baltar, that he realizes that she was full of shit.
Yeah, that it's out there. Okay, so Chief is going to meet up with Cabot, who is in charge in place of Zeno Fenner. They were thrilled that Chief was coming by because Chief was the leader of the Union on New Caprica. So he's like a great ally to have here. He gives them the tour. This place is about as safe as a bomb, Mike. If I'm Chief, I'm like, I'm getting out of here.
Well, yeah, that's what he'll point out later, right? Like, no, they're not massively sabotaging us. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now. I would be a hostage, or I would be Danny Nooned, or I would be dead. But we get a tour of the Tillium refinery, but it's not a very happy tour right now because there's just like an itty bitty pile of Tillium left. This is the first time we really see Tillium, Josh. I don't know why I expected it to be like, it's almost piled up like the salt that they use when it snows outside. I don't know if you've ever seen like alongside the West Side Highway, right? There's giant repositories where they house all the salt. That's kind of where it is. But right now, all the production is kind of stopped on it because, oh, would you believe it? These darn pressure valves, which they need, have gone mysteriously missing.
They're missing. And Cabot says, well, we might be able to find them if you improve our working conditions and get our friend out of jail. And so Chief's like, yeah, so they might improve this if we improve their working conditions and get their friend out of jail. And Adama's like, or we put all of them in jail. And so she's like, please don't. Listen, they could
please don't. There's like an 11-year-old kid with them.
They're trying to buy time. Like, they're good people. And Adama says, yeah, that's fine. But also, like, everybody, Roslin's on the line too. She's like, work sucks. We know nobody is happy at work anymore. Every job sucks. They have to do the stuff. Everybody is under terrible conditions. No one is having a good time is what President Roslin says. And Chief says, well, can we at least release the guy and start discussions? And Adama's like, no, we'll arrest the guy who's replaced him. So that's what they do. They arrest poor Cabot, who experiences a horrible PTSD episode once he's imprisoned. This is reminding him of being imprisoned on New Caprica. And like, he's been scratching the walls. He's hanging out with not Rickety Cricket, who's like, oh my God, he's going full Rickety Cricket over there. You gotta help him.
Could have been me.
I think that's Rickety Cricket.
So Adama and Roslin, to a certain extent, their perspective here and how much it differs from Tyrell's perspective. I think what makes this episode so good is, like, again, as hardline, and let's face it, extreme as they are, being like, arrest all dissidents. If you do that, first of all, eventually there'll be no one to freaking man all of these conveyor belts within the Tillium refinery. But they're trying to espouse basically like, we all are making sacrifices here. You know, there are jobs that nobody wants to do, but we have to do it in order for the fleet to function. But what Tyrell is supposing comes from a completely different angle, which is something that we actually haven't focused on in a while, Josh, and something that led to Baltar's election in the first place, which is less so focusing on where we are going and more so focusing on where we are. Like, the search for Earth is awesome. I'm glad Adama's like, I want to go find Earth. But the fact of the matter is, right now, Tyrell is looking at the situation and is seeing a possible cycle continue of like, I know that these are special circumstances, but who's to say if we find Earth that this same stuff won't keep happening? That it's like, great, you found your final resting place, but so sorry, little Nick, because your dad was a deckhand, you are born to be a deckhand. I think that despite the special circumstances, Tyrell is recognizing in the moment, and it's ironic given the fact that he has been all about getting back to the status quo. He is realizing that the status quo is not good for the future. That, like, yes, sometimes trying to make things go back to normal isn't great.
Yeah.
Instead, you could use it as an opportunity to make something new rather than recreate the old, because the old might not necessarily
maybe
be
it wasn't
flawless.
good.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the perspectives that both of them are coming in, I think makes sense given their position. I do think that they go a little too aggro on Adama in this episode. You know, maybe Roslin kind of starts the beat by just hearing the term "the book," immediately arresting Zeno Fenner. But
that's
then
not great. That's bad behavior.
And then to have Adama really one up it by being like, all right, every single person who is affiliated with just the idea of not wanting to work will get arrested immediately. That will surely teach them.
That ought to teach them. Okay, these guys get released from prison after they reveal where the stuff is. Chief makes sure that the seals get turned back on. Milo, this little kid, is like, "Oh man, I've gotten to do everything here at the Tillium factory except press the button.
Gee,
Can I press the button?
Can I operate the machine, mister?" I was really nervous because this kid seems like such a little asshole. I was afraid that
it was douche chills for sure. This was like undercover Cylon Boxy.
Yeah, but I was so afraid though that when he's like, "Can I turn on the machine, mister?" And he's like, "Sure, why not, kid?" That then he'd be like, "Great, I'm turning everything off and wrecking it." Like 100%. I thought this was going to be a 100% sabotage job, but for what it's worth, he was somehow sincere. He just said it in a very douchey way.
Afterwards, Chief goes to Roslin and is like, "Hey, so we're doing child labor." She's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "No, we're doing child labor." She's like, "No, it's actually fine. It's perfectly normal. It's people passing their skills on to their kids. It's not ideal, but..." And then Chief, to your point, is like, "This isn't good. We're going to live in a society where the best you could do is whatever your parents were." And Roslin at least says like, "Good point. That isn't great. Tori, can you make a list of everybody in the fleet with relevant job experience, then hold a public lottery and put them on shifts?" And this also ends up being imperfect because we go and see that the lottery has happened and Chief and Figursky are like organizing everybody to get over to the refinery ship. And there's this little kid, little Danny Noon, who is like, "All right, well, I'm registered as a farmer, but that's because I was going to do a farm internship. I was Mike Bloom's roommate and I left for the summer and he was going to push our beds in the middle. And I said, that's totally fine because I'm going to be a farmer and I don't need that bed anymore. But then the world blew up and I never got to farm. So I don't know that I should have to go." And Chief's like, well, you kind of have to go. Because Figursky's like, "We make one exception. There's going to be 15 more.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of people being like, "No, you don't understand. My situation is special." So it's really tough. And we'll get to this later. Like, I knew pretty much off the bat, like, oh, this guy is going to either die or like get severely injured, because the whole thing was him being like, "Oh, you worked on a farm, so you know how to handle heavy equipment." And he's like, "No, I interned on a farm, largely inventory." And it's like, okay. And they're going to prove exactly the point as like why unskilled workers should not be in this environment with grave circumstances.
Yeah. He's going to find, Chief's going to find a copy of Baltar's book. He sees that there's a section titled "The Emerging Aristocracy and the Emerging Underclass." And so he's going to go and pay Gaius Baltar a visit and basically be like, it's pretty funny that you're writing this stuff. You really think I'm going to like believe that you're just some little farm boy from Aurelian? You don't even sound like an Aurelian. And this is a moment that I've been so excited to get to.
Yes. Yes.
James Callis delivering hard as Gaius Baltar code switches and begins speaking in this Aurelian accent that he has worked his entire life since he was a 10-year-old boy to eradicate, so that he may go to a place like Caprica, a cultural hub, and leave behind all of these gruff, rough and tough farmers that he grew up around. I know that Gaius Baltar is often like liar, liar, pants on fire, but for me, this reads as a very sincere moment and is one of my favorite moments of Baltar across the series. I think like just the way that Baltar is able to like access that childhood memory and like what he would have sounded like if he had continued to grow in that way is this great moment that I think leaves an indelible imprint on Chief, who in just, in another world called New Caprica, or even in the world on the immediate other side of New Caprica, if they had Baltar on board, Chief would have been executing this guy. And now here he is like listening to him being like, interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a... Now, I would say it's a great development for the character if there wasn't a part of me that's like, how much of this is bullshit? Like, we know Gaius Baltar is a character that has been essentially, crossing a bridge of lies, putting one plank out in front of him at a time to be like, all right, I gotta just take this other step. And then as long as I get to the next step, I'll be able to make it over to the other side eventually. If that's the case, he did an incredible job selling this. I love James Callis bringing in this like hybrid, like Cockney sort of Irish lilt.
It rattles in the back of your throat.
Yes, exactly.
This is what it sounds like to be Aurelian.
And to hear him kind of pontificate on this idea that, like, I agree with you that depending on where you're born, you have a certain lot in life. And the only way that I could change who I was and change the direction I'm going to go is to change who I essentially was as a person, to change how I spoke, to essentially deny my origin, to look ahead to the future. You shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to play up or play down where you come from. I mean, it's interesting. We kind of see this in the inverse on reality shows, Josh, right? Like, think about someone like JT in Survivor Token Sheets, purposely playing up the, I'm just an Alabama boy.
Shucks, yeah.
Yeah, kind of angle, which gets people to not only inherently trust him, but kind of dumb him down a little bit, much to their peril. Here, Gaius Baltar is kind of doing the opposite of like, if I wanted to be taken seriously, I had to pretend that I was from Caprica. Is that not a sign to you, Chief, where the only way to guarantee myself a good future is to eradicate my past? What does that say about our present? And again, to your point, it's so interesting that like it comes from the most unlikely of sources, that it comes from this guy that Chief has spent the better part of a year and a half absolutely loathing.
Like fighting against,
Yeah. And now he's like, damn it, you and I have more in common than you may think, especially in this moment when, again, the people who he confides in and trusts in the most, the leaders of this fleet in the form of Adama and Roslin, to him, quite frankly, seem incredibly out of touch with the needs of not only him, but the people around him. Gaius Baltar may be full of shit, but in this moment, he's saying what they're thinking.
Yeah. And it's going to live rent-free in Chief's head as he goes back to the Tillium factory. They've figured out where some of the problems have been. There's effectively there's like a whirly doohickey button thing that's wedged in. We got to unwedge the whirly button doohickey thing. And Chief tries to do it. He goes underneath the belt. Something's stuck. That's the thing. He can't quite get there. His arms are just too thick. He's just got like two...
I'm too swole.
I'm so sorry. I'm too swole. I'm way too swole. Danny Noon's like, I can help. Let me give it a try.
And so, like,
and Danny Noon like gets under there. He's like, oh, I think the whirly girly is just right here, and then you just do a little twist of the knob and Danny Noon. He says, hand.
He says, Danny, give us a hand. He says, okay, sure. Literally.
Yeah, and so his hand goes away. He loses his hand, Danny Noon does. His dirty hand.
I can't tell how much of the blame he should take for this, because like if he
How much
felt
Danny should take or Chief?
he felt so out of his element, why should he have stepped up here? If he felt so uncomfortable, should he have been like, if he was like, I should operate heavy machinery, I wouldn't be like, well, let me just get in there and see what's happening.
Maybe it was one of two things. Maybe it's like, all right, I'm going to get in there and either I'll get transferred out of here for good behavior, or at least I'll get a better job here because they know that like I'm willing to do stuff. Or if I've determined that they'll never get rid of me here and I'll always have to do some sort of manual labor, maybe I'll just like get rid of my left hand and like go and like get disability checks from the
that's
big
true
G,
as well.
you know? That I don't know how much they're paying out in disability in space.
I thought I saw in the beginning of the episode, the deck crew, I thought someone had a prosthetic. I could have sworn I saw a deck crew member have a prosthetic. So I'm assuming they'd set him up with one of those.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll check back in on Danny Noon when he shows up.
I imagine him like
Barrett from Final Fantasy's Gatling gun hand.
Yeah, what you used to do, Danny? I was a hand model.
Actually, I was a foot model, so at least I didn't lose my feet. This is enough for Chief. Chief watches this happen, and he just like Batman walks to the button.
Oh, and he's
the like,
music.
Milo, I got this one.
The music is like, I said, like justified guitar twang to it. Again, very different from what Bear McCreary previously was like. It's like wow, bam, down, down. As he just, to your point, walked with purpose, shuts it down.
That's what you heard. I heard it different. I heard.
I mean, I do think that Aaron Douglas could probably have passed for like a Bulk. You know,
yeah, he's Bulk's father. Bulk's
dad. But I mean, I guess what drives him over the edge, right, is like this is proof as to how, again, out of touch Adama and Roslin are. That they say like, oh, this is a great policy to institute. If the workers are tired, we'll just recruit a bunch of people from all over. And it's like, no. You need skilled people to be able to do these incredibly dangerous things. And your decisions are coming at the cost of these people from a mental and especially physical perspective. And so the only way to get to them, and again, that's what makes the rest of this episode incredibly interesting and very, very unsavory from Adama's perspective, is like sometimes the only way to communicate with people is to like starve them out, is to deprive them and be like, you won't listen to our petitions, to our demands. That's what Zeno Fennon said, right? Like, why is it that I keep asking for appointments and the only time you talk to me is when something is wrong?
Right.
A show that I've covered here on We Know Scripted TV, Josh, that I know that you have watched, is Silo. And this was something that was talked about a lot in the second season and was utilized as well, that you had, talk about stratification, the people on the very top of the silo and then the mechanicals all the way in the deep down in the very bottom. And they're like, we're sick of being treated like shit, like being ignored and being invisible citizens. So let's show the power that we have by literally turning off the power and showcasing what we can do. I know that, listen, we like decorum, but sometimes the proper situation does not call for that.
You got to push.
Decorum does not fly sometimes. People will walk all over that decorum.
Yes. Sometimes you got to stand up and use brute force. You got to push that lever. It happens.
Roll the hard six.
Got to roll the hard Celix. You got to roll the hard six. Danny Noon inspired hard six here from Chief. So I agree with that. And it works to some extent. First, Adama has Chief arrested because now there's like a general strike. So like we're not even like we're only flying essential missions right now. And
they could communicate it back to the big G, right? Where it's like Racetrack and Starbuck are walking down like, ha ha, high five,
heck, bro? Yeah, and they're not allowed to fly. And so Adama goes to Chief. He's like, listen, I respect what you're doing, but I'm going to kill your wife if you don't stop. And Chief's like, no, you're not. He's like, yeah, actually, I really will. And in fact, I would kill 10 Callies. I would kill 10 of your wives to make sure that this fleet isn't destroyed. You're prioritizing like a principle over the safety of the whole human race. And Chief's like, I mean, all right, like, you dick, like, I'm not going to let you kill my wife or, one of them, let alone 10. So he gets on the phone, he calls it off, and Adama's like, all right, let her go. Also, you have a meeting with the president. You wanted to talk like labor stuff, right? And like, don't come to me and tell me that like, all you had to do was ask, Chief. He had to do something in order to get
your attention
in the room. And I
Literally,
don't know why we couldn't have skipped the step of trying to lord 10 Callies over Chief's head. I think we probably could have done without saying, I'd kill 10 Callies to stop you from doing what you're doing. I think what he could have done is like, all right, Chief, you got our attention. You got a meeting with President Roslin in 10 minutes. That's at the same outcome without threatening the lives of 10 Callies.
I really hate this. This honestly might be one of my least favorite Adama moments in quite
some
time.
It's not good. Yeah, it's
well,
bad.
Because not only is it obviously very emotionally brutal and extreme, and like I guess he's really trying to get to the heart of the matter by being like, I will kill your wife if you don't back down.
10 times.
But at the same time, to me at least, it's illogical. And this is why, again, reminds me of season 1 Adama, was because this was kind of the perspective at the end of season 1, right? Which is like, I will declare martial law if necessary, Roslin, if you're going to act out against me. But at the same time, like, I don't know. The pamphlets are being distributed. Does Adama and Roslin by proxy really think that it's just, if we step on enough ants, there won't be enough crawling around? You know, we'll exterminate everything by jailing the leader.
A labor union for ants?
But it's just this idea of like, if anything, in my opinion, if you are saying any dissidents who do not listen to us and follow our laws will be punished, you're striking up even more resentment and even more danger. And I'll just say it, not great coming from a guy who got Luigi Mangione in the first place. This is, again, going back to this idea that we have hung our hat on so deliciously since season 1, but it's still been a fundamental fact of like, if we treat people this way, how are we different from the Cylons? I think it's a very salient point you brought up with people, with him being like, while you're doing this, the human race would be at stake. What he's kind of implying to me is like, the workers aren't human. Like, you've got to be doing this for the sake of humanity. Okay, so then these people, these particular people,
they don't count.
They have to sacrifice their humanity and freedom at the expense of everybody else. Whereas, the other parties, while they are making hard decisions, are certainly not putting life and limb on the line in the way that these people are.
In the way that Danny Noon literally just did.
Exactly. So it's again, I'll just keep using the term out of touch. And I think just the way Adama came in, it was very aggro. I think it was really out of character. Like, I think the way that he regarded the group in unfinished business felt like the right amount of dad Adama to me, right? With him being like, all right, shit, I've gotten too far away from this. We're not here to do this. Everybody get back to work. Like, that's sort of the lecturing that I think can be admonishing while not at the same time as extreme as I'm going to shoot your wife 10 times.
10 times. I would kill 10 Callies in order to save humanity. I get it, by the way. Like, I understand 10 Callies, sure. I just think it was a little unnecessary.
Especially because, again, to your point, it ends with like, all it took was for him to call the strike off. And he's like, okay, now you can meet with the president. Like, I'm pretty sure he would have called the strike off anyway if he had met with the president.
Let's go meet with the president, Mike Bloom. Chief gets to sit down with Laura Roslin, and he says, so this stuff isn't fair. And she's like, yeah, no, you're totally right. And he's like, it's like all like geographically dictated. It's all about where people were born. And Roslin says, yeah, but it's skills. And Chief's like, yeah, but the skills are because of where they were born. And it's just a fact of life. And she says, well, it's a fact of life that I can't change. And Chief says, yeah, but what we could do is we could like draft in a whole, like 10 U's. We could
shoot them.
We could shoot 10. We'll hire 10 Laura Roslins from Colonial One, people who are unskilled, to learn how to become skilled. Or
even like what he was pitching was sort of like an undercover boss thing, right? Of like, let's get people from Colonial One down, doing some of the grunt work so that they understand a bit more as to what people do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, because then maybe you'll have a little more empathy for us and like have better ideas about how to improve it. But for now, like, we need R&R for these people. We need training programs. And Laura says, all right, well, we got to focus on the workforce we already have. And so this is an area where the union's going to need to give ground. And Chief goes, a union? And she says, yeah, isn't that what you're representing, Chief? You're the king of the Union. He's like, no. There's no kings in the Union. She's like, you're the king of the Union.
Look at you. You're the king of Union.
Yeah, she's like, no, I think you're missing the point.
Oh, I guess that is Kelly Crutchy.
Yeah. And so I think that's right.
I think Edward James almost would have made a killer Pulitzer in a news.
He would have been. I think he would have been a good Bill Pullman.
He would have been good. I think back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Starting now. The king of Union. Yeah. So she says, if it's true that the fleet is becoming polarized with the ruling class and an underclass, then Cylons, then we don't need the Cylons to destroy us. So please fight for the people. And he says, okay, did we have to go through all of this to like get to this same point?
Did Obama have to threaten
Did he have
to
to threaten
my wife 10 times?
10 versions of my wife? The episode ends with this really cute note. Celix gets to have her dream job. Starbucks shows up. You're 20 minutes late to being a pilot. Chief pins her. She's now Ensign Celix. She gets to like sort of like skip off giddily into the sunset. Chief tells Starbuck, okay, be nice to her. She's used to doing lots of laundry and she needs to have fun at work now. And so that's the end of the episode. And it's a sweet moment for Celix.
I did not realize that pilots had to be officers. Like, is Hot Dog an ensign?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
How about that?
I guess there's room for everyone.
Room for everybody. Including on our MVPs and LVPs, which I've got 3 MVPs this week and 2 LVPs. You've got 2 MVPs and 3 LVPs. And I'll just start with Celix. She got promoted. How do I not give Celix an MVP point?
Good for you, Celix. I mean, hopefully this means we get to see more of her and she's not on laundry duty, though. Now I do worry about maybe some of like the hazing procedures with the pilots. We've seen a little bit of this. And so I don't know what they make those nuggets do. I hope it's not the pilot's laundry because I feel like I would rather do a pilot's laundry than a deckhand's laundry for sure.
I'm going to give my next point to Danny Noon. I want to remember the heroic Danny Noon. He gave a hand for Battlestar Galactica. Let's give him a hand.
Give him a hand.
Yeah. Who do you got?
All right. So I'll give one to Chief Tyrrell.
Yeah.
Of course. Markedly improved from the previous episode.
I'm giving him my final point as well.
Yeah, a much better thing. I mean, I think this was actually showing a little bit of like Hilo in The Woman King to me, where like he seemed to be a character that was sort of our moral compass in this episode of receiving a lot of stuff, rising up into. What's interesting is there was a lot of talk of we all have to do things that we don't want to do in this future. And like Chief kind of has this arc the entire episode of like, he doesn't want to necessarily be the Union leader, but he finds himself representing these people, speaking on their behalf, and he does it with aplomb, gets them somewhere, at least certainly a lot more rights than they started the episode with. So far and away, the best character in this episode. And I will give a point to Gaius Baltar.
Yeah.
Because look, he's riling the people up. He's getting out the materials. He's connecting with them in a way that clearly Laura Roslin wasn't for the first 40 minutes of this episode. So the fact of the matter is, like, well, he is out of sight, locked away in a brig. He's far from out of mind for the human population. I
was so close to giving Gaius Baltar an MVP point specifically for that scene with James Callis, which is one of my favorites in the show. And then he mind-comphed his book. So I have to give him an LVP point, actually, is where I ended up with Gaius Baltar. My second LVP point is going to go to Figursky because I think he's a sexist pig with
more like Perversky, am I right?
Yeah, Perversky. I don't like Perversky. Mike, your LVPs go probably to the right people in this episode.
Yeah, listen.
1 to Roslin, 2 to Bill Adama.
Yeah, and I only gave 1 to Roslin because, again, she does come around a bit at the end and decides to meet on common ground. Bill Adama's terrible in this episode. And again, I understand him expressing his perspective of, we all have things that we're going to need to do that we don't want to do. You know, we all have to make these sacrifices to help the greater good. But the way he went about expressing it, and especially the way he tried to quote unquote negotiate with Tyrell, are some of the worst things I've seen this character do in quite some time. It's a really bad look. Again, I would say like bordering on uncharacteristic, just more so extreme than anything, but extremely bad for him.
No Cylon activity in this episode, Mike. This is when we're doing the fleet versus the Cylons, and there's nothing to report on. We do an NA. Mike, this would be the 4th time in a row. 4 non-applicables in a row in the Cylons versus the Fleet for 5. I believe actually 5 total this season, and 4 of them are in a row. 5 total series wide. 4 of them are from taking a break from all your worries through now Dirty Hands.
Wow, yeah. So we are experiencing, like, in real time, a month of no Cylon activity.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it. I think when you look, so this actually is turning out to be a fairly useful exercise, I think,
Yeah.
Mike, where like we could see the season.
No, well, look who's not laughing at the NA anymore.
No, you did good. This was a good innovation for sure, because the season 3 totals as they stand, the Fleet has won 5 times. The Cylons have won 3 times. We've Colonel tied thrice as well. 5 NAs. So for a season that began with the Cylons in power, not only did the Fleet overcome the Cylons at least through this point, but we just haven't had to deal with them at multiple points. And I wonder if that's indicative of something happening here in season 3 with these sort of like middle mushy gushy episodes, right? Like I feel like at least I'm feeling the amount of episodes here in season 3.
The bloat.
Yes, I am. I think that season 3's highs are very difficult to match anywhere else across the show, but it's like it's got some of the most like Middletons across the show as well. And I think we're like, this episode is better for sure, and a lot that I really like in this episode, but I'd still say we're like kind of in that realm right now. 4 episodes in a row without major Cylon activity makes me feel like that's 4 episodes we could have spent on New Caprica.
Yeah, it's really interesting in that I am not surprised, and I think on paper this does make sense that like we just had this major conflict with the Eye of Jupiter, this point of meeting between the two before they end up going off in their separate directions to find Earth. So it makes sense that you don't want to keep going back to those Cylons, especially because, let's face it, we have Athena, Caprica 6, and Baltar now with the Fleet. There's really not a lot of characters that are enjoyable or fleshed out enough to go back to. Deanna got killed. We talked about how much we kind of low-key don't like Boomer anymore. Like, there's not a lot to explore there. So I wouldn't say necessarily the solution to these episodes would have been going back to the Cylons. At the same time, the answer wasn't necessarily, okay, we're directing away from the Cylons and producing some episodes that are, let's face it, bad to, in the case of last week, like, okay. This is, again, the first at least good to very good episode we have had in quite some time of Battlestar Galactica. And so I understand their aim in saying, we don't need to bring the Cylons back in immediately. Unfortunately, then you kind of have to supplement that with, I'll say it, good ideas for episodes, and I don't think they necessarily did so.
They didn't hit that on all of them. So let's rate the episode in that mold on a scale of 0 to 4.2, 4.2 being the highest. You can write in down the hatch, rhap@gmail.com. Rate every episode of Battlestar Galactica. I was thinking about this in this block of 4. And I think ultimately the sort of like this like inward soul searchy Gaius Baltar episode, taking a break from all your worries, I think is better for me than this episode, which almost makes me want to boost my rating for that episode.
Oh, interesting.
A little higher, because I gave it a 3.5. And if I like that better than Dirty Hands, then Dirty Hands ends up at a 3.4. And I think both of them probably could go a little higher. I'm not going to adjust them right now. But that's how I looked at it, is like, I think that this is the second best episode of this post Eye of Jupiter stretch, which I know was a little bit lower for you ultimately, the Eye of Jupiter stuff. I still really like it. You liked this episode a lot more than you liked the last couple of weeks of Battlestar Galactica.
I mean, that's not saying much, but yes, I did. And I liked it more than you, Josh. Yeah. I'm going to give this a 3.7, cool. Which is, I think, the highest I've rated an episode. I did give Unfinished Business a 4.2 for reasons, but this is the highest episode besides that, Josh, for me, since Torn, episode 5 of the season. Yeah, I have to reflect back on this. I don't know if me and season 3 of BSG have gotten along.
I don't think that's unfair. I think the opening arc, remarkable. And then like it's been like a little bit of there's been highs.
There's been highs.
There's been lows.
But I think this episode, for me, I think the material of it really lifted this for me. And I don't think it's in a way where like, well, the themes are good on paper, but the execution isn't great. I think the thing that honestly brought it down, the number of points that it did, is because of the behavior of Adama and Roslin, which are verging on out of character. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of really good stuff in here. I've talked so much about how much I like the concepts of getting to check in more with the citizens of the fleet, of the rank and file, to see exactly what's happening. I really enjoyed that here. I think there's a lot of stuff to take away from this episode that applies to our society in terms of, again, stratification of class warfare, the proper ways to protest to get people to listen, et cetera, et cetera. And I think Chief Tyrrell being put front and center here in such a great way after we've seen him do some not so great stuff in recent episodes was very welcome. And I think he served as like the perfect person to kind of put this all on, and has some awesome guys Baltar stuff on top of that. So I think it's very, very strong. It's at a 3.7 for me. I might even raise it up to, as we get past through this, maybe through the Yadis, I will think it over to even higher. This is not a perfect episode, but it really brought back to me a lot of these great themes that I loved from this show very early on, and it feels like a nice return to form.
Totally agreed. Deleted scenes this week, Mike. Was there anything that we should be hearing about?
Yeah, so it's interesting in that we talk about the extremes in showing what protests can do, and we hear at night, Chief is trying to sleep, and Callie is keeping her up by remarking upon the fact that, like, remember when Baltar, shortened our rations and we shut off 3 power plants just to show them, like, hey, we can strike back with force too? Tyrrell says Baltar was a thug. And Callie's like, yeah, and who isn't truly Adama, who's jailing people, and Laura Roslin, who is, like, forcing people to work to the bone and sometimes lose their bones? And she says, you don't want to admit it, but the truth is Baltar is onto something. And Tyrrell just, like, gets out of bed in response to that. The other scene is another Tyrrell Callie scene. Callie actually had a much bigger role in this episode. She really was up and about, truly.
She's Grandpa Joeing it.
Where, look at me, where Tyrrell's like...
signature line, yeah.
Yeah, what Tyrrell says, good news, Callie, like, I was able to get the 11-year-old kids out of the refinery. And she's like, good, you brought 17-year-old kids instead. And she says, I did note that I was looking at the people that you pulled. Not one from Colonial 1 in this lottery system. Tyrrell says, we need people with specific skill sets. Callie says, most of my job is carrying around a broom and a mop. I think these are things that people can learn on the fly. And this is sort of, I think, rehashing some of the points that we had mentioned before. Tyrrell says, the union is gone. We're here. We're in uniform. It's over. And she replies, somebody has to stand up for them. That somebody used to be you. Wow. And then he walks off again.
Wow.
You've changed, man.
Business, yeah. So they didn't kill 10 Callies, but they killed Callie's 10 scenes, it sounds like. So that's a shame. No jumps in this episode, Mike. 8 frac.
I mean, that's a plot point, right? Zeno Fenner's like, well, with this amount of Tillium, you can't make a jump at all.
Can't really frac. Can't really jump. We can frac. 8 fracs, 3 from Chief, 1 each from Adama, Celix, Skulls, Cabot, and not Rickety Cricket, Zeno Fenner. 129 fracs in season 3 overall, 340 fracs so far, 129 fracs for season 3, 340 fracs for the entirety of the series up to this point. Mike Bloom, this is where we sign off for the next couple of weeks. One more episode down, and Adama and Roslin have yet to frac.
There was an invitation.
There was an invitation.
Invitation, I will say. She did say no.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But when we return in April, we will be back with Maelstrom, Season 3, Episode 17, Maelstrom. Any predictions for Maelstrom, Mike?
Yeah, so they're gonna play this board game that I've heard a lot about, where there's like fun little figurines involved. Kind of odd. It's not really a bottle episode. They're just gonna play a tabletop role-playing game, but I imagine a lot of drama is gonna come out of it. No, I imagine that we are going to, maybe we're manifesting this, Josh. We can finally get some focus on the Cylon content. I mean, Maelstrom is to at least set up either metaphorical or literal this idea of a storm brewing on the horizon. Maybe we quite literally get like a couple of characters stranded in some sort of space maelstrom and having to work their way out of it. I will say, listen, I was able to manifest last time, like, let's check in with the blue collar workers. So let me do this time while we take the time away. Again, can we follow up on Starbuck and Hilo finding out that, like, she may or may not be the chosen one? Can we just, like, briefly pontificate on that? I'm not sure how much I like the plot point, but kind of odd to leave it hanging. So hopefully that's something we get to address at least a little bit next time. Though, I'm also, so the finale is a two-parter, right?
The finale is a two-parter, yes.
Okay, so I imagine we're not getting any two-parters from here on out. It wouldn't be two-parter into another two-parter.
No. So we'll have a regular episode, a two-part finale. And we'll do that two-part finale as a single podcast. So 3 podcasts left about season 3 before we're in the final season. And we'll have a whole movie that we watch in between seasons 3 and 4 also.
Oh my God. Yeah. All right. Well, then I'll say when we come back in April, we'll be talking some Starbuck.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Get some coffee to stay wide awake in the meantime between now and the next Down the Hatch podcast drop. Look out for that in April. Until then, you should be subscribed so you never miss an episode. Down the Hatch, wherever you get your podcasts, here on WeKnowScriptedTV.com. You can send in feedback to us, down the hatch, RHAP @gmail.com. You could also talk to us on the internet. I'm at Round Howard. He's at a Mike Bloom type. Mike, what's going on? What do you want to plug?
Well, you can also talk to me in person as well, just to establish that. If you see, you don't need to just talk to me online.
Are you inviting people to come stalk you, Mike?
No, I'm just saying if you find me in person.
If you find them,
yeah,
exactly. Did they reveal how they found you?
Yes. I will not ask immediately because that would be impolite, but I will eventually broach it. So just prepare it as a topic of conversation.
We're preparing it.
Yeah, I mean, over the next month, I'll be on my usual beats. I'll be doing Survivor and Amazing Race podcasts here on RHAP. I'll be writing about them at parade.com. And I'm sure plenty more stuff. Josh, as March turns to April, there will be a couple of big shows returning for a season 2 that I will be very excited to cover here on We Know Scripted TV. But I think also people should check out We Know Scripted TV in general because there's a lot happening. We just started the Daredevil action. We are rounding the bend, obviously, on Severance. White Lotus is like now officially entering the back half of its season as
well.
So
Jackets, a ton of stuff happening here on We Know Scripted TV. Tell a friend, hit subscribe, and tell your friend to do so as well. You'll never miss any of the things that, Mike, you're talking about some really great shows coming up in April. The Last of Us coming up in April. Andor, speaking of class struggle.
Yeah.
I think
did Chief Tyrrell have sent like a hologram of himself posthumously to appear huge in the square at the moment of climacticism?
Hopefully he doesn't have to posthumously. Maybe he could just like beam he could just like FaceTime in.
Yeah, exactly. Just the giant Tyrrell.
Hey, it's me, Chief Tyrrell. So lots to look forward to as a really great year of TV here in 2025 continues. Until April, folks. Down the Hatch signs off. We wish all of you the frackin' best. We'll be back soon. Bye.